Welcome to this two-panel event, Israel-Palestine, Where is the UN? My name is Mandy Turner, and I'm Professor of Conflict, Peace and Humanitarian Affairs here at the Humanitarian and Conflict Response Institute at the University of Manchester. I've been researching and writing about the situation in Israel and Palestine for nearly 20 years, with 8 of them resident until 2019 in Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem. Sheikh Jarrah is one of the areas recently spotlighted in the international media because of Israel's forced evictions of Palestinians living there, the expansion of settlements, and Israel's aggressive policing against residents, journalists, and activists. But this is a situation that has a long history that needs to be unpacked in order to understand it. And this does not just apply to Sheikh Jarrah, but to the wider context, which is one of the things we aim to do here today. In Jerusalem, there are the issues of settlement expansion, aggressive policing, Israel cancelling Palestinians' identity cards that allow them to live in Jerusalem, and the status of the holy sites, particularly the Haram al-Sharif and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. These are all issues with long histories, but with recent triggers, particularly during the holy month of Ramadan, when Israeli border police stormed the Haram al-Sharif and used rubber bullets, tear gas, and smoke grenades against worshippers. In the West Bank, Palestinians are experiencing continued settlement expansion and Israeli military rule, which means that when they are arrested, Palestinians are tried by military court, and many are held under administrative detention, which means detention without trial. Since 1967, 40% of the adult male population in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, which is roughly 800,000 people, have been the victim of some form of Israeli detention. Meanwhile, inside the Green Line, Palestinian citizens of Israel face discrimination in daily life, land ownership, and even in the very constitution of the Israeli state, codified in the Jewish nation-state law, which was passed in 2018. Gaza has been experiencing a crippling blockade by land and sea, which has been put in place by Israel since 2007. This has destroyed its economy, reducing this highly populated tiny area to be reliant on humanitarian assistance. Regularly, the Gaza Strip faces Israeli air bombardment, which has killed and displaced countless numbers of people. Most recently, of course, was last month. And let us not forget about Palestinian refugees, with many still living in refugee camps in the occupied territory and in neighbouring Arab states. There's been no solution to their situation either. There are countless UN resolutions related to ending Israel's occupation, ending its settlement expansion, ending its blockade of the Gaza Strip, and for a just resolution for Palestinian refugees. The 1993 Oslo Peace Accord, which was supposed to lead to a sovereign Palestinian state, and therefore a two-state solution, has clearly failed. Recently, we've had a number of human rights organisations accuse Israel of instituting an apartheid regime in the occupied territories, including Human Rights Watch and Israel's own B'Tselem. This is a charge that Palestinians have made for many years. And there is a forthcoming investigation by the International Criminal Court into possible war crimes committed in the occupied territory. Israel has already said it will not cooperate with this investigation. Here today, we have experts to help us understand what is going on. Our two panels will consider what is most significant about the current situation. They will explore what constitutes a violation of international law and why the UN and other organisations have been unable to respond adequately. Further issues for discussion include the impact and significance of the mobilisation of Palestinians inside Israel who are demonstrating in solidarity with Palestinians in the occupied territory and what this reveals about their citizenship. We will also be looking at how dynamics might change in the future, as well as what opportunities there are for an international response that goes beyond just a ceasefire. We have a very impressive group of speakers with us today. We have Suhad Bashara, Michael Link, Raji Sarani, Catherine Gallagher, Ardi MCs, and Shawan Jabareen. There's a slight change to the originally advertised lineup because unfortunately both Diana Buttu and Valentina Azarova cannot be with us. They both send their apologies and best wishes for a fruitful event. I'll give you some more information about these speakers as I introduce each panel. This afternoon is split into two panels. You should have a Zoom link for these. The format of each panel will be contributions of around 15 minutes from each speaker. Then we will open it up for questions from the audience. Because of the large numbers and the fact that this event is being recorded, we are unable to allow audience members to ask their own questions. So please write your questions in the Q&A function box and I will put them to the panelists. Each panel will last around 1 hour and 45 minutes, and we will have a break of 15 minutes between the first and the second panel. The event will end at 4:45 p.m. British Summer Time. The first panel here just now includes Raji Sarani, Suhad Bishara, and Michael Link. Our first speaker is Raji Sarani, who is a human rights lawyer in the Gaza Strip. In 1995, he founded the Palestinian Center for Human Rights and is its director. In 1985 and 1986, he was an Amnesty International prisoner of conscience and served as a member of the International Commission of Jurists and as vice president of the International Federation for Human Rights. Sarani has won many awards for protecting and advancing human rights, including the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award in 1991. Our second speaker is Suhad Bishara, who is a senior lawyer in Israel. She is the director of the Land and Planning Rights Unit at Adalah, the Arab Center for Minority Rights in Israel. Bishara served as lead lawyer in landmark constitutional human rights cases regarding Palestinian citizens of Israel and international cases, humanitarian law cases concerning Palestinians in the occupied territory before the Israeli Supreme Court. She is also currently a PhD candidate at King's College London Law School. Our third and final speaker on this panel will be Michael Link, who is the current UN Special Rapporteur for the human rights situation in the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967. This is a position he's held since March 2016. He is also Associate Professor of Law at University of Western Ontario in Canada, where he taught courses in labour rights, human rights, disability rights, and constitutional and administrative law. In January 2015, Link was named to the Mayor of London's honours list for his work on humanitarian issues. I thank you for attending this panel and thank you to our speakers for agreeing to be part of this event. I hope you enjoy a discussion and I will now hand over to Raji Sarani to start off the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me and be part of this very honorable discussion. It's a great opportunity to meet with some colleagues and friends. Are you hearing me? Hello? Hello?
Hi, we can hear you, we just can't see you. If you try, sorry.
There we go.
Yeah. Thank you for this kind invitation and thank you for being with you. Well, I think what had happened in Sheikh Jarrah, it coincided with 73rd anniversary of the Nakba. And just uprooting once and again. I mean, these people of Sheikh Jarrah, like other parts of Jerusalem, as part of this systematic policy of the Israeli occupation of ethnic cleansing, Judaization of Jerusalem, was very meaningful. It's like really opening deep wound for Palestinians. And it just spread like like in unprecedented way all over the place, in Sheikh Jarrah, in Jerusalem, West Bank, inside the Green Line, Gaza, inside and outside Palestine. So for Palestinians, having this particular event of Sheikh Jarrah on the 73rd anniversary of Nakba was something very meaningful, very painful for Palestinians. The other thing, it was Ramadan, and in the last 10 days of Ramadan, and in Al-Aqsa, and the Haram al-Sharif, and I'm Muslim by birth as a Palestinian. I'm not a religious person, but like any Palestinian who witnessed what had happened in Al-Haram al-Sharif or in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, how ministers, Knesset members, how settlers, border police, Israeli army, and a lot others come inside these most holy places in the most holy night. You're beating, insulting men, women, young, old, while they are practicing basic, fundamental ceremonies of Ramadan and the religion. That was too much for the feelings, for the dignity of man and Palestinian. Like Muslim has no right of dignity, no right to even practice basic fundamental, rights of religion. And that's also, added another serious dosage. Even this most holy places, or one of the most holy places for Muslims, can be disputed and people can be insulted as such. Of course, in the midst of all that, we are having the 54th anniversary of the Israeli belligerent occupation for the rest of the West Bank, including Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. And we are talking about one of the most prolonged belligerent criminal occupations. And as if we are talking about just unfair occupation, crime of aggression, as everybody knows, and it comes in this anniversary as well. That's added another dimension. Gaza subjugated to criminal, illegal, inhuman siege and persecution for 2.2 million people, and suffocated Gaza entirely, socially, economically. Otherwise, it shifted Gaza to be sort of animal farm. International community dumping to it some food and medicine, and brought unprecedented records like 65% unemployed, 90% under poverty line, more than 85% who receive rations from UNRWA, not because we are lazy, because there is no movement for goods or individuals, while we are having one of the highest percent of university graduates on earth, while we have no illiteracy in the Gaza Strip, and very skilled working class. But this is one of the biggest man-made disasters, occupation disaster. Now, as if Sheikh Jarrah belonged to people of Sheikh Jarrah, as if Al-Aqsa belonged to some Muslims in Jerusalem, and as if, no other Palestinian should be caring about what's happening. It's not only that, even places like Gaza have been subjugated to 3 wars in 5 years, in 2008, 12, and 14. I'm not saying, this is unprecedented, no war crimes had happened. It had happened, war crimes against humanity, and this was broadcasted live on air, and people saw it at the real time. But when Palestinians react to that, whether peacefully or otherwise, it's not our right to protest in singing, in dancing, in writing on the walls, in music, in art, any form of objecting, I mean, this criminal belligerent occupation and raising the voice of our right of dignity, freedom, and self-determination, it's absolutely denied. That's why this went all over the place. In Jerusalem, in Jenin, Tulkarim, Hebron, Bethlehem. This was in Lod, Ramla, Haifa. This was in Ain al-Hilwa in Lebanon and Gil Yarmouk in Syria. Same thing happened in Jordan with Palestinians or in Gaza. So Palestinians, with this criminal, unprecedented level of this dosage of suppression, oppression, blood that the occupation gave, it just erupted the Palestinian rage and volcano, and it triggered this last wave of war. And what's unique, I mean, what had happened in Gaza in 11 days, it's by all standards, I mean, unprecedented. Unprecedented because usually we know Israel targets civilians and civilian targets. They target towers, and this is not the first time. They target people, and they deleted entire families from civil registration. But this time, what had happened from the first minute, first hour, till the last hour, civilians and civilian targets were at the eye of the storm. They were in the eye of the storm, and they were the target. And almost, I'm personally living the mathematics and the chemistry of this place. I never ever witnessed anything like that. We know all about Dahya doctrine and what had happened with Hezbollah and the Dahya and how Israel, I mean, leveled everything. But at this time, they made it Gaza doctrine, Rimal doctrine. They didn't pick the poor area of Beirut and they bombarded and they leveled it. But they picked the creme de la creme of Gaza, the most beautiful buildings, the most beautiful areas, the most visible places. And they intentionally, I mean, destroyed it. The most fantastic 70 factories we are having in Gaza, they just destroyed it and deleted. Jalal Tower of the Al Jazeera and AP, other places like Shuruk, the incubator of media and journalism, Johara, the same thing. Very beautiful residential places like Al Andalus and Hanadi building. All of this has been raised, and police stations, civilian police stations, banks, streets with the water system and sewage system, electricity system has been destroyed. I don't know, I mean, what even these streets have to do with security. They were claiming tunnels and so on, but Gaza, you know, it's a very tiny place and any can know anything within minutes, and nothing as such, I mean, had happened. So the Israelis, I mean, their target were all these things. Besides, I mean, you are talking about entire family areas like Abu al-Auf, Al-Kolak family, Al-Habibi family, and others. It's ugly, sad, bad, unprecedented. This mighty state in the Middle East, the one with the F-35, with the most high-tech rockets, can be made GPU 32 or 39 or 68. You are targeting residential places with it, banks, Abu al-Auf family and others. And that's why there was incredible level of frustration, of angry. The anger was everywhere. And for some times, I mean, in this entire place, 365 square kilometers with the 2.2 million people, no safe haven in it. And no one can imagine what next morning will happen. Are you going to see the dawn again? Are you going to see the sunlight again? Are your family, I mean your wife, daughter, or son, you will live next day with them, or this will be, I mean, the last time? This is the blanket of terrorism, state terrorism. Israel tried to spread over 11 days all over the occupied territories. And that's why what I'm saying, what has happened, very symbolic, and just brought everything back to fundamentals. You are talking about Jerusalem, you are talking about refugees, you are talking about occupation, you are talking about the siege and blockade of Gaza, you are talking about stop war crimes, crimes against humanity, persecution for civilians. For me, as somebody who believes still as romantic revolutionary, as a human rights lawyer, in rule of law, not the rule of jungle, of believing that we deserve dignity and the freedom, and we deserve end of occupation, and we are entitled for our self-determination and independence. I just felt, do we have the right to be good victims? Is it human to be good victim? Now, this what was going on, I mean, all over the place, and that's why people revolted in Lod, Ramla, Haifa, asking for protection inside the Green Line, and as a citizen of Israel, and we want to have an end for this belligerent criminal occupation and be entitled for dignity, freedom, and self-determination. Security Council is there to protect peace and security in the world. And Security Council was watching what's going on, very, very well informed. And they were watching even the TV, not through any other means, like human rights organizations or UN reports, but they were watching. I mean, these were crimes live on air. And this body, you know, totally paralyzed and has nothing to do against these crimes committed against Palestinian people at the daylight, even not because of that, even resolution didn't pass, but even pre-statement, they were not able to do it, which is, I think, I mean, very, very big shame. I mean, that they are failed them both. Thank you for the full legal political immunity provided, I mean, by the US to the state of Israel, who vetoed any attempt, I mean, to do that. Thanks even for the EU, when we hear Mr. Borrell talking about the right of self-defense for Israel. Same thing applies for the German foreign minister or the British prime minister. There is big wrong in this world, and I, as somebody who knows ABCs, you are in much better position to know better than me. Since when criminal, belligerent occupation do have the right of self-defense? As if the Palestinians, the ones who have the mighty army in the Middle East, as the Palestinians who are occupying Israel, as the Palestinians who are, doing the war crimes against humanity, against Israel. I mean, it's Kafka situation, too much, and that, I mean, lies really, I mean, very, very big question. What world we want? One Do we want world with rule of law or rule of jungle? Do the Palestinians have the right to be good victims? Should we be good victims, even when we are entitled for self-determination? What we need more, even when we resort to universal jurisdiction as we did in the last 20 years. And I want to remind everybody here that First World Conference Against Racism, when it was held in South Africa, we Palestinian and international civil society and the human rights organizations, we said in a clear-cut way at that time, Israel a new brand of apartheid and Israel doing genocide against Palestinians. And the world should stand, speak truth to power, stop what's going on against the Palestinian people. Now, when we resort to universal jurisdiction in 2003, Europe, and we able even to win some fantastic decisions from the Audiencia Nacional in Madrid or from the London courts or the Swiss courts, out of the blue. I mean, we see parliaments due to incredible and unprecedented American-Israeli pressure, they change the law, fix it, and make Israel more immune in changing these laws, and universal jurisdiction cases not valid anymore. I mean, at these places and at Europe at large. Now, we witnessed all when we resorted to the ICC, and after PA signed, ratified Rome Statute, January 2015, and we as well, I mean, began to do our submission, and the preliminary investigation began, and the pre-trial chamber concluded her decision on February 3rd, and till March 5th, Bensouda was able to declare her decision after she addressed the Benelux states and after she addressed 40 other states in New York, and she and her team under unprecedented direct security threat. We are aware about Trump's decision before that, his executive order, which threat, directly the prosecutor and their team and the judges. So there is a clear-cut standards. There is a clear-cut positions. UN very unfortunately failed. I think we failed in having the political will for accountability, as if international law, international humanitarian law, and the human rights, something for academics, with all due respect, or intellectuals, or to be discussed. I mean, such gatherings and meetings. I mean, all these are there to protect the life, dignity, and the freedom of civilians at the time of war, not peace. So if the target is the civilians, like we are having the entire pyramid on its top, and that's, I mean, the warning I'm sending from this part of the world. We cannot be good victims of the 21st century. We cannot be good victims for a criminal belligerent occupation. We cannot be subject just to once and again war every few years. People witness one time war in their life. We cannot be subject for this criminal siege, I mean, over the people. We have to have an end for occupation. And I think, I mean, what should be addressed really, the issue of the right of self-determination independence of the Palestinian people. We are sick, we are tired, we are bleeding, but nobody on earth can take the hope from our heart or our minds. Nobody on earth can take strategic optimism that we have, because we know we are on the right side of history and on the right page of justice. And we are determined more than any time before not to give up and not to be good victims. And we have to remind everybody we are entitled as a Palestinian people to practice our right, as the British say, of self-determination. Nobody, I mean, if the world keeps silence with the conspiracy of silence or by providing full legal political immunity, we are entitled for self-determination. We are strong, I can assure you. We are determined to achieve our rights. We have no right to give up, and we will never give up. We are the stones of the valley. We have been here ever. We will continue here forever. No power on earth will take us from here. We are strong, but we are much stronger with the free, committed people across the globe who expressed, and we knew it, we felt it, and we are much, much stronger with the support of these free, committed people for justice and the rights of the Palestinian people. Sorry for being long a bit, but here I'll stop. I'm happy, to answer any question later on. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Raji. That was an excellent start to the panel. And you rightly pointed our attention to the Samud of Palestinians in their struggle for their rights. So thank you for reminding us of that. We're now going to pass on to Suhad Bishara for the next comment. Thank you.
Sorry for that. Thank you, Mandy. Thank you for having me. I'm really pleased to be here and grateful for organizing this workshop. I think I want to start with the UN Human Rights Council decision from May and express my view that I do see it of great importance. And its importance lay in that much of the discourse which has shaped international solidarity and discourse with the Palestinians until recently, or recent like 2-3 years, has been centered around human rights violations, of course, which is still the case, and based on civic status of the Palestinian, end of occupation, and this two-state solution, subsuming to the Israeli strategy of fragmentation of the Palestinian people into 3 main categories. However, this approach has many gaps, and for many, the framework is seen largely as unable to hold Israel to account and to frame the Palestinian struggle in a more assertive, comprehensive, and holistic way, and too weak in dealing with questions of power and domination, which I think the UN Human Rights Council decision started initially to deal with, following many other changes in discourse that I will address at the end. And this is where I really see its importance. Now, I want to go back a little bit to the fragmentation. The war of 49 and then 67 and the Gaza disengagement plan divided the Palestinian people into several categories and even subcategories that are distinct in terms of legal frameworks applied to them. And to a large extent, these legal frameworks have also normalized and shaped the demands of the Palestinian people as distinct, fragmented groups. The Palestinian refugees subject to UN resolutions and in some aspect to IHL. And the process by Israel here seek to internationalize the refugeness, feeding into the Israeli narrative and nationalizing the land of the refugees under Israeli national laws and terms. The second, of course, is the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, subject to IHL. And the third, which will be the focus of my presentation, is the Palestinian citizens of Israel, subject to Israeli domestic law and some aspects of international human rights law. And again, I will elaborate a little bit, not too much because of time limitation on this. But before I get to that, I want to set the common grounds for the three groups by saying that since the establishment of Israel has managed to maintain the situation of fragmentation and to preserve first a clear Jewish-Palestinian divide by means of Israeli legislation and policy, regardless of your location as Palestinian or civic status as Palestinian. And the second, Jewish geopolitical privilege and domination in mandatory Palestine down to the present day. And the Palestinian citizens are no exception in this regard, despite their civic status as citizens of the state of Israel, because these were inherently distinct within the Israeli law and politics. Now, law never sought to establish an Israeli collective nationality, relying instead on its definition as Jewish. Thus, the Palestinian citizen was perceived as subversive and a threat to the Jewish character of the state and its connection to the Jewish people. And this definition created an immediate political and civic status and distinction between the Jewish and Palestinian citizens of Israel based on their ethnic identity or nationality, turned into a political one dominating Israeli law and policy. Thus, the Palestinian natives who became citizens of the state of Israel were isolated from the rest of the Palestinian due to their citizenship, while maintained under Israeli law distinct from Jewish citizens because of their Palestinian nationality or ethnicity. Now, this distinct characterizations of the Palestinians in Israel has had critical ramifications for the policies, laws, and constitutional framework in Israel proper. I do not have the time to go deep into much details of these policies, but I will outline its main characteristics. This distinction drawn from the definition of the state as Jewish and as translated into day-to-day policies means arbitrary confiscation of Palestinian-owned land to privilege Jewish settlement. This means segregation in many parts of Israel, I mean residential segregation. This means development of Palestinian towns and villages is perceived as a threat for Jewish settlement, for reserving lands for future Jewish settlements. This means arbitrary disposition of Palestinian citizens to establish Jewish towns, as we nowadays see in some cases in the Naqab, south of Israel, like in Hiran, under imminent threat of disposition to establish Hiran as a Jewish town. Ras Ijraba is another example, and many others. It means no return for the internally displaced, the same as the Palestinian refugees who became refugees outside of historic Palestine. This means ban on family unification between Palestinian citizens and their spouses from the OPT. They cannot live as a family in Israel except for exceptional cases, which is really exceptional and rare. Restrictions on political participation. The manifest of a political party cannot negate the definition of Israel as a Jewish state. Calling for a full democratic values is an accusation under this context. And this means oppressive policies and brutally oppressing a political process, as we have seen in May last month, and as we have seen in October 2000, which resulted, unfortunately, back then in the killing of 13 protesters by the security forces. 12 of them were Palestinian citizens. Now, what we have seen in May was also, we have seen a complementary role last month between Israeli forces and the settlers and Jewish mothers in the mixed cities mainly. That was the embodiment of the privilege, supremacy, in a very life-threatening way, unfortunately. This was also complemented by inaction on behalf of the police to prevent Jewish organized groups who incited for racism and violence very clearly out there on the net. If we were able, as human rights lawyers, to track those, the police should have done that. And although we have written day after day and supplying evidence for the police, for the Attorney General, look what is happening, look what is being organized. So far, we haven't received anything. And the backup from the officials, including Prime Minister back then, Netanyahu, for the police to go out there and do their job, not needing to worry about any investigations into their actions or inquiry committees, and so on, and so on. So the distinction between the Palestinian and Jewish citizens was constitutionally reinforced with the enactment of the basic law, as you mentioned, Mandy, Israel Nation State of the Jewish People, enacted in July 2018. And what is important about this law, not only its status and what it means to be, but also it sets forth the constitutional order of Israel and articulates the ethnic, religious identity of the state as exclusively Jewish and capable of overriding any ordinary legislation. And one of the most important provisions in the law is provision 1, which basically states that the land of Israel, Eretz Israel, historic Palestine, is the historic national home of the Jewish people, in which the state of Israel was established, and in which the Jewish people exercise their natural, cultural, and historic right to self-determination, which of course negates the right of the Palestinian people for self-determination, and so on. And it also provides that the state views, state authorities, the development of Jewish settlement as a national value and will act to encourage and promote its establishment and consolidation. And this law has, because of its status as a constitutional basic law, will have an effect not only in Israel proper, but also in the occupied territories, definitely East Jerusalem and the West Bank, and in other forms also in Gaza. So the law basically contains no commitment to democratic norms, no guarantee for the right to equality, and no prohibition of discrimination on the basis of race, nationality, ethnicity, or any other category of all people living under the Israeli sovereignty. And it also does not define the citizenry. It refers instead to the Jewish people as its subjects, and limiting sovereignty and self-rule only for the Jewish people. And instead of asking who is an Israeli citizen, it continuously engages with the questions of who is a Jew and who has the right to come and live in historic Palestine, in Israel and the West Bank. What this means in terms of national law as a tool of change for Palestinian citizens, our experience taught us to understand Israeli law as a political act motivated by ethnic political definition of a state as a Jewish state. Lawmaking in Israel is fundamentally ethnically motivated. It's law as creating and maintaining domination and ethnicity as distinct politically, using the law as a tool for a change under these circumstances. Of course, there's always possibilities, but these come with some and probably huge limitations. Part of these limitations, and I cannot elaborate too much because of, again, time limitations, is lack of ability to contextualize, lack of ability to challenge basic definitions and basic characteristics, very limited ability to succeed. But this is, again, part of the fragmentation policy, which means normalizing the legal struggle and setting its boundaries. As citizen, you struggle based on the Israeli problematic law, and we have boundaries and we have rules for that. But this is your limitations. The same for the occupied territories and the Israeli interpretations for the international law within the Israeli Supreme Court jurisdiction and so on. But this situation poses a serious challenge to our comprehension of Israeli legal formation throughout mandatory Palestine, not only in Israel, on both sides of the Green Line, and its structural characteristics. It challenges our contextual understanding of the Israeli legal formations, past and present, and their full complexity, and of whether there is a framework that enables us to read the law in context, to capture its continuously decisive structural role in Israeli dominations and for formation on both sides of the Green Line. We have been advocating for a while now to see the domination aspect of Israel over the Palestinian people, regardless of their civic status or place of residence. And in recent years, we have seen more and more Palestinian human rights organizations, academics, contextualizing the situation in a broader framework. Recently, we have seen the apartheid framework, colonialism, settler colonialism, referring to the Palestinian situation and their status on both sides of the Green Line. This is why I think the UN Human Rights Council decision is an important one, and even historic one in this context. And again, I'm aware of the limitations of the UN as an international institution and of the Human Rights Council decision and so on. But we still have a long way to go, but to open an ongoing commission of inquiry that will examine in depth the human rights violations on both sides of the Green Line. It marks for the first time that it's given the mandate to investigate and examine all underlying root causes, which is also for us, I mean, the framing is changing. And we see this as a process going in the right direction. It might take time, but there is a process happening here. There is a change in discourse happening here that we need all to value and work to advance it. And this legal, the shift in the legal framing. Because again, I don't think we, from our experience, you can fully understand what's happening in the OPT, including East Jerusalem, without understanding the Nakba, the military regime and the status of the Palestinian citizens of Israel. And I think the fact, I mean, the incidents that triggered the events in May, like the fact that Sheikh Jarrah families threatened to be evicted, being refugees, their properties in Jaffa, the internally displaced in Jaffa, like that's just a few weeks before they were demonstrating in Jaffa streets because these same families in Jaffa that are internally displaced are under imminent threat of being evacuated from the properties in Al-Ajami. The brutal reaction of the Israeli army to the Great March of Return demonstrations in 2018, we need to connect all of these to fully understand how the system works, how the law works in Israel. Otherwise, I think we would be missing very important contextualizing of the situation, and then to strategize how do we defend the human rights for the Palestinians. I think I will end here. I hope I didn't take too much time.
No, thank you very much, Suhad. You've really set out the situation, and I agree with you. Many years ago, a Palestinian friend said to me, you can't understand what's going on in the occupied territory unless you take Palestinian people as a whole and understand it right back to the Nakba, and even before that, to the British Mandate period. So thank you for setting that out. We'll then pass on to Michael Link, who no doubt will take up what you were saying, Suhad, about the UN Human Rights Council and their recent decision. Over to you, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy, and thank you to for the previous presentations. They were all very enlightening. They've set a great stage for what I want to be able to speak about. What I'm interested in speaking about primarily goes to the Security Council, because as we saw in May, the Security Council met 4 days during the height of the violence going on in Gaza. And in each occasion, the United States blocked the creation of a common statement. This was not even at the level of wanting to issue a resolution to call for a ceasefire, but simply a statement. And the US blocked it on each of the occasions, primarily to give Israel the chance to, I guess in US words, to finish the business that it had started with respect to Gaza. What I want to look at is take us back a little bit in history to try to understand why the Security Council has played the role that it has, or the role that it hasn't had during this period of time. I'm going to go back 41 years. In the late June of 1980, the Security Council adopted Resolution 476 amidst diplomatic reports that the Israeli Knesset was seriously debating a private member's bill to formally annex East Jerusalem. In its resolution, the Security Council warned Israel that any changes to the legal status or the physical character of Jerusalem would be null and void and would be a flagrant violation of the 14th Geneva Convention. The Jimmy Carter administration allowed the resolution to pass, while it itself abstained, because it was upset by the backtracking by Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin on his promises during the 1979 Camp David Agreement to recognize Palestinian rights and to halt settlement expansion. Now, significantly, Resolution 476 included 3 provisions which would foreshadow the increasingly empty role of the Security Council and the international community in supervising, excuse me, the Israeli occupation of Palestine. And this, in my mind, wound up being the high watermark for the work of the UN Security Council towards ending the Israeli occupation. So the Security Council in Resolution 476 said 3 important things. First, the Council reaffirmed the overwhelming necessity for ending the prolonged occupation of Arab territories captured by Israel in 1967. So by 1980, it already had become an overwhelming necessity to end the prolonged occupation. Secondly, the Security Council, and this I'm quoting, strongly deplored their continued refusal of Israel, the occupying power, to comply with the relevant resolutions of the Security Council and the General Assembly. It was already recognizing and putting its finger on Israel's defiance with respect to the direction of the international community. And third, the Security Council reaffirmed its determination that in the event of Israeli non-compliance, to examine it would then examine practical means and ways to ensure the full implementation of the resolution. So it was already promising that accountability would be triggered in the case of Israel not complying. A month later, in July of 1980, the Knesset went on to adopt the Basic Law, Jerusalem, which is a quasi-constitutional law which proclaimed that the city, united and complete, as the capital of Jerusalem. So in response, the Security Council adopted Resolution 478 in August of 1980, with the US again abstaining, which condemned the Jerusalem law, censored the failure of Israel to comply with Resolution 476, and directed UN members to withdraw their diplomatic missions from Jerusalem. But the Security Council did not threaten Israel with any consequences in the subsequent resolution, and none ever followed. Of course, today, East Jerusalem remains annexed with more Israeli settlers and more Israeli settlements than ever. So in a nutshell, what happened in the summer of 1980 encapsulates all that followed. The UN would anchor its supervision of the Israeli occupation firmly within the framework of international law and human rights. In response, Israel would consistently defy the direction of the Security Council and the General Assembly and continue its largely solitary and untenable stance that international law does not apply to the occupation. The various peace initiatives, which began a decade later with the Madrid-Oslo process, would wind up relying on realpolitik rather than international law to frame the negotiations, and accountability measures, whenever they were raised by the international community, would never be acted upon, signaling to Israel that would be no costs to its truculence. Now, the 54-year-old Israeli occupation stands out today as being paradoxically one that's both thick with laws and yet quite lawless. Sorry. Let me start again. I apologize for that. The 54-year-old Israeli occupation of Jerusalem stands out today as being paradoxically both thick with laws, yet quite lawless. There is no other long-standing conflict in the modern world where the international community has so frequently pronounced upon the principles of international law that are to govern its administration and its endpoint, yet where the dominant state has been so defiant and the international response has been so limp. International law is not meant to be an umbrella that folds up at the first sign of rain. Over the last 5 decades, the UN has adopted hundreds of resolutions by its leading deliberative organs, the Security Council, the General Assembly, and the UN Human Rights Council, that have overseen the conflict. Accordingly, the prolonged Israeli occupation must fully end. Both Israelis and Palestinians are entitled to live in peace and security and have the right to self-determination, including sovereign, secure, and viable states within the boundaries of Mandate Palestine. All of the 250 Israeli settlements in East Jerusalem and the West Bank are a flagrant violation under international law. East Jerusalem has been illegally annexed by Israel and remains occupied territory. The Palestinian refugees from 48 and 67 have the right to choose to return to their homeland. Gaza is an integral part of Palestine. It remains occupied, and the Israeli blockade is a prohibited form of collective punishment. Yet, as Gideon Levy, the veteran Israeli columnist for Haaretz, has written, and I quote, "No country is as dependent upon the support of the international community as Israel. Yet Israel allows itself to defy the world as few dare. The Security Council has stated in 22 resolutions since 1967 that the Fourth Geneva Convention applies in full to the Israeli occupation. In 11 resolutions on the Israeli occupation, the Council has expressly endorsed the principle that the acquisition of territory by war or force or military conquest is inadmissible. And in 5 resolutions, the Council has held that Israel's civilian settlements in occupied territory are illegal. Israel has complied with none of them, notwithstanding the obligation under Article 25 of the UN Charter, which stipulates that member states are to carry out the decisions of the Security Council. When the Security Council most recently restated these foundational legal principles in December 2016, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dismissed the resolution as delusional and part of the swan song of the old world. Just as instructively, Israel, with the support of the United Nations, has successfully insisted since the start of the Madrid-Oslo process in 1991 that any negotiations with Palestinians must be conducted outside of the framework of applicable international law and the prevailing international consensus, which means that the various peace initiatives over the past 3 decades, from the 1993 Declaration of Principles to the 2013-2014 Kerry Initiative, and I'm going to suggest that the 2020 Peace Plan for Prosperity is quite another story, have listed the final status issues to be addressed, but never referenced the well-established legal framework by which they're to be negotiated. This has allowed Israel to treat the core issues of self-determination, Jerusalem, borders, annexation, the refugees, and the settlements as items to be negotiated, rather than principles of law that must be complied with. Instead, Realpolitik has shaped all of these arguments, enabling Israel to bargain from the strength of its many illegal facts on the ground. The lack of a sturdy rights-based approach is the primary reason why all of these peace initiatives have failed. So when we look at the inertia of the Security Council in meaningfully responding to the non-compliance of Israel with its resolutions and directions, this has become a body blow, I submit, to the efficacy of international law. In his 2011 memoirs, Kofi Annan was disturbed by what he called the prolonged and sometimes brutal occupation by Israel, and he lamented the timidity of the Security Council's response. Even when the Council took positions, he said, it did not establish mechanisms to enforce its will, unquote. He also identified a leading source for the Council's paralysis, quote, the unhealthy possessiveness of the Middle East peace process by the United States of America. Since 1973, the US has cast 31 vetoes at the Security Council against draft resolutions critical of the Israeli occupation. In each case, it had been the only Security Council member casting a negative vote. No other permanent member of the Security Council has vetoed a Security Council resolution critical of the Israeli occupation. And indeed, since February 2009, which is almost 12 and a half years, the UN Security Council resolution has adopted 720 resolutions. Only one of them, Resolution 2334, which had to do with the Israeli occupation. So if the international community had determined that Israel's occupation of Palestine by 1980 was already prolonged and already a matter of overwhelming necessity to end, and if Israel had already demonstrated by 1980 its unwillingness to comply with the express directions of the Security Council and the General Assembly because it was confident that no consequences would follow, how are we to understand the situation 4 decades later? According to statistics from Peace Now, in 1980, there were 12,500 settlers in the West Bank. By 2019, there are 441,000 settlers, 35 times as many. If Realpolitik, the discarding of international law, and the absence of accountability have brought us speeding past the last exit to a 2-state solution, then shouldn't the next attempt to relaunch a serious peace process be anchored instead in the agreed upon national and individual rights of both Palestinians and Israelis. Such an approach would recognize the grossly asymmetrical balance of power on the ground, and it would seek to reward not the occupying power that has further annexation in its sights, but to aid instead the subjugated population whose quest for freedom on its own land has been perpetually thwarted. It would accept that the Israeli leadership will not alter its defiant course unless and until the international community, operating in unison, imposes an escalating economic and political cost on Israel for the occupation's endurance. The enduring advantage of pursuing a rights-based framework to find a lasting solution in Israel and Palestine is not only that it enjoys an overwhelming international consensus, a rare commodity, but that its values, including equality, accountability, and the rule of law, are the robust pillars which would offer the best chance for a shared democratic, secure, and beneficial future. Only a peace process anchored in the aspirational reach of these fundamental principles can address the realism of the irreducible facts on the ground. And this brings me back then to the present. I've mentioned previously Resolution 2334. When it was passed in December 2016, the Security Council directed the Secretary General to report on a quarterly basis with respect to several of the aspects of 23334, including Israel's compliance with the direction to immediately and unconditionally halt the construction of and expansion of its settlements. The two UN Security Council, two UN special coordinators have reported on a quarterly basis since then to the Security Council on Israel's compliance. They have issued, between the two of them, 18 reports since the beginning of 2017, and each report says exactly the same thing. No steps have been taken by Israel during the reporting stage to comply with the direction with respect to the Israeli settlements. So where does this take us in the end? You know, it's this oddity we have in international law and international relations. On the one hand, the UN Security Council is exceptionally well informed about Israel and Palestine because of the continual high-level consultations. It's aware, fully aware, of its own very rich body of international law governing all the major issues with respect to this, and yet it is inherently paralyzed as the leading deliberative political body in the international order, in large part, by the inherent conservatism of the United States. So let me just end with this. I'm always reminded of it because it's a favorite analogous by everybody, but I'd like to add something else to it. We all know that Martin Luther King said that the arc of history bends slowly, but it bends towards justice. But that's an incomplete statement. The Reverend Jesse Jackson added to it by saying, yes, the arc of justice bends towards justice, but only because we make it bend. So this is a plea, if you like, to civil society, which has been exceptionally active and growing with respect to understanding the situation in Israel-Palestine. We've got to redouble our efforts on a range of fronts: diplomatic, political, and judicial, particularly at the International Criminal Court, to be able to create more and more points of accountability. If the international diplomatic community will not, on its own, impose any forms of meaningful accountability, which to me must rise at the very top of the agenda with respect to Israel-Palestine, then it's up to civil society to be able to take these steps to push diplomatic community, and in fact, in times have to go around them to try to find other points of pressure with respect to accountability. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that. It was really rounded off this panel very, very well. I just want to remind the people viewing, if you can type your questions into the Q&A box. I've gathered a few already for our participants. And as one could imagine, there's a couple of things that keep cropping up. So I'll just pose them all as questions to each of you, and you can choose what you decide to answer. The first relates to the issue of the call to talk about apartheid. And people are asking about kind of what is the efficacy of using the charge of apartheid as a crime against humanity. What do you see as being the strength of using the concept, the charge of apartheid? So it's question number one. The second set of questions that have come in has come around the status of the holy sites in Jerusalem, and particularly perhaps the role of Jordan in this, given that Jordan is a sovereign state. What has Jordan been doing around this, and what could it do around the increasing Israeli encroachment on the Haram al-Sharif, as we've seen recently and as we've seen in previous occasions? So that's question number two. And the third question relates to the ICC, the International Criminal Court, which a few of you have mentioned. And a few people have asked what could be the possible impact of an ICC judgment given Israeli sovereignty. So that's three sets of questions. I can see that more are coming in at the moment. So I'll pass over to the panelists to decide what they would like to answer while I gather some more. Raji, would you like to go first? Oh, you are still silent.
I'll begin, but I'm sorry for interrupting with the electricity and so on sometimes in and out. Sorry for that. Regarding ICC, the good and the most fresh news, though it was meeting in camera with Fatou Bensouda yesterday and her team, but we were having fantastic team. It was farewell, I mean, for her, and we appreciated, I mean, really the heroic role she and her team played. They were subject to security, political, professional, direct threats from ex-President Trump and his administration to Israel. And we are aware about all these things, even after the pre-trial chamber decided in February, she was subject, I mean, and her team to direct, unexpected security threats. Now, we are aware about the environment. We wish, of course, Karim Khan all the best, but we believe from day one in rule of law, we believed that this ICC, it's a place where Palestinians can have justice and dignity for the victims we are representing. And we invested our best, knowing, awareing, not naive about all odds and problems, I mean, we might face. But I think the Palestinian team showed incredible level of professionalism, stubbornness, independence, and work all the way along, and to a large extent with the allies of this team, with all odds and obstacles, managed to have the pre-trial chamber decision and managed to have the decision of opening the investigation. So the prosecutor on March 5th decided to open the investigation. Till yesterday, we didn't know that the team is formed. But yesterday, we knew the team of investigation is formed. It's there. And of course, I mean, there is some problems here and there regarding resources, capacities, human resources, financial resources. But that's normal in any investigation they begin with. But we think and believe that the train, departed the station, and the investigation will begin in this regard. We know how much U.S. Put legal, political pressure, obstacles, and how many, I mean, some European states, especially, I mean, Boris Johnson of UK, when he said, we have the president and the registrar, and now the prosecutor, and we are establishing member of the ICC, but we will never ever allow Israel to be held accountable as a friend in the ICC, which is big shame, I mean, for Prime Minister to say that, irrelevant what his foreign minister said later. We, as representatives of victims, fully determined to go all the way along. We know it's not going to be easy journey. We know it's going to be hard, tough. Benjamin Netanyahu stated in simple, clear-cut way, this is a strategical threat for Israel. We will not allow it. And we are not naive to the Israeli politics. We know what does that mean. We are ready for the price, whatever. The cost of dignity, justice, too much, always. We represent victims. We look to their eyes and their families every day. We are loyal to the soils, to the blood, to the pain and suffering of these victims. We have no right as representatives of victims to forget or to forgive those who committed war crimes, crimes against humanity, persecution against Palestinian people. We will target them, we will hunt them, we will bring them one day to justice. And I think the long way, the long march in the ICC began, and we will invest our best to achieve justice in this regard. We have no illusions. We know the limits of our power, but we know, as I said it before, all what we want: dignity, freedom. We want justice for the victims we are representing, and all what we want: the rule of law, again, international law, international humanitarian law. It's for people to have it and feel it on their skin and to enjoy it at the time of war, not peace. Those who committed crimes, those who feel shame, either they stop it or don't do it, but they cannot deny any to hold them accountable one day. I'm sure that tomorrow is ours and justice will prevail one day.
Thank you for that, Raji. Suhad, would you like to take any of these questions or all of them?
Yeah, the holy sites in East Jerusalem, I honestly, I'm not aware whether and what Jordan is doing in this regard. What I know for sure that the status quo is changing in East Jerusalem, including in the holy sites. On a day-to-day level, we have seen that very clearly during the Ramadan, but it started long before and it continues after. So definitely not enough is being done to maintain the status quo in East Jerusalem. And I think a lot of the changes happened also during the Corona, and I think the Israeli authorities took advantage of the Corona restrictions to impose some more changes in the area. Now, concerning the apartheid, I think we should I mean, there is a distinction between apartheid as a crime and apartheid as contextualizing a political system or systematic violations of human rights. And it's two different frameworks. And I think in the reality, more specifically of the OPTs, it was only a matter of time, because dealing with the ongoing human rights violations as fragments, as piling up without concluding what this means vis-a-vis the Israeli occupation, the Israeli administration, Israeli control and domination of the Palestinian people, means that we are, turning the same wheel and remaining at the same place all the time. And I think as human rights organizations, activists, lawyers, it's only our duty to bring things together, to see what these human rights violations mean, what these systematic violations teach us about the system. This is not only helpful in terms of describing, but also helps in terms of strategizing, in terms of what wheels of international law can we further start moving to gain justice for the victims, to gain rights for the Palestinian people, or so on. So I do see it as something that it was only a matter of time. It's very important, and international law is there with a very clear say. And Israel is no exception, should be no exception. As well as the Palestinian people as victims should not be exception in terms of limiting their scope to certain human rights violations and not looking to others.
Thank you, Suhad. Michael, would you like to come back on
Sure.
any or all of these questions?
Sure. I'll briefly address two, Mandy. First has to do with the ICC, and I agree with the comments that have been made both by Raja and by Suhad with respect to this. The one center for meaningful accountability in the world today with respect to the Israeli-Palestinian, or the Israeli occupation of Palestine, has to be the ICC. The good thing about it is that it represents the highest level, I guess, of what the world has achieved in determining what are war crimes, crimes against humanity, crimes of aggression, and there's a fairly large buy-in by significant parts of the international community with respect to this. The downside, of course, this process is the sun rises slowly. This moves very, very slowly. The complaints were initially filed in February 2015, which is 6 years ago, or 6.5 years into this, and we've only just begun the second level of the formal investigation level with respect to this. I know that there will be plenty of evidence that is going to be put before the court, but I'm mindful of the fact that there is high-hanging fruit. I think the wars on Gaza, what happened in 2014, what happened in 2018, and now likely what's happened in 2021, will require a significant expenditure of resources in order to be able to gather the kind of judicial evidence the court thinks it needs in order to prove this. I'm also aware, because it's an issue I'm particularly paying attention to, that the issue of the settlements is actually a rather low-hanging fruit. This should be by far the easiest of the complaints in front of the International Criminal Court to be able to proceed with, because the transfer of a civilian population into occupied territory, directly or indirectly, is a defined, a very clearly stated war crime in Article 8 of the Rome Statute, as is the crime of aggression with respect to annexation. So those are the two actually are the low-hanging fruit, and I'd like to think that those will go ahead relatively painlessly through the formal investigation stage. with respect to the call for apartheid, you know, this, I'm seeing obviously some reluctance by the international community to accept this, but boy, you know, what a difference a year makes with respect to reports coming out from Yashdin, B'Tselem, Al-Haq, and now, of course, Human Rights Watch. Each one successively, that much more detailed, that much more comprehensive, and all of them quite persuasive with respect to this. When I first started hearing the word 25 or 30 years ago applied to Israel and Palestine, it always struck me as that it was originally just a rhetorical allegation, but now it's become a well-developed legal and political concept. And I noted just in the last couple of weeks that both the Foreign Minister of Luxembourg and the Foreign Minister of France have used the term, not to describe it as it is, but saying we are headed towards a situation where if there is no hope for a two-state solution, then we've reached the point of apartheid. So I think, you know, we can thank Palestinian, Israeli, and international civil society for their extensive research that has begun to put this on the main stage. And I think we're going to see more and more use of this term in the time to come. And if I can just add one point with respect to this, you know, the world has accepted the framework of the Fourth Geneva Convention on Occupation, but it has never taken the additional step as required by Common Article number 1 to actually ensure respect for this. Accountability has always been the missing key that could otherwise open up the titanium cage that is the occupation. I argued several years ago in one of my first reports as Special Rapporteur that the occupation had actually turned into an illegal occupation. And I was hoping that would be taken up by the international community to raise the stakes of what they had to do. Nothing happened. So if the issue of apartheid is now becoming increasingly a part of our human rights language and maybe on the fringes yet, but on our diplomatic language, in many ways, it is only the international community to have itself to blame that if it had taken strong steps, as I suggested 40 years ago, with respect to applying and enforcing the rules of international humanitarian law, we wouldn't be here in the 2021, you know, with the international community now beginning to realize is confronting the issue coming from civil society of apartheid. It is the inaction, it is the paralysis of the international community, and particularly the dominant Western powers that control the bulk of these peace processes that has led us to where we are today. And the response by civil society is only natural when they've realized that this is not an occupation anymore in the classic sense. This is an occupation that's become indistinguishable from annexation and, the new argument, becoming indistinguishable from apartheid.
Thank you. Thank you for your very full responses. I've got another series of questions, some of them probing a little bit more deeply on some of the responses there, but some new questions as well. So I'll just do what I did the last time, which is I'll state the three that we have, and then I've clustered them, and then you can respond how you wish. The first relates to the inertia of the UN Security Council, which, Michael, you touched upon a lot and we're all very aware of. And this is a question from someone in the audience, but this was actually also something that RD Inces and I wrote about that was published last month in Jadaliyah, which was the possibility of sidestepping the inertia of the UN Security Council and using the Uniting for Peace resolution to kind of circumvent this paralysis. I wonder the question from the audience, and actually from me too, is what do you think about that strategy? Do you think it could work, or what is the obstacles to invoking a Uniting for Peace resolution at the UN General Assembly? The second question relates to back to the ICC, and this is probably one that's a bit more specific to the kind of people, the prosecutors, the change in the chief prosecutor towards Karim Khan. So one of our audience participants asks, would you consider the ICC investigation to be in jeopardy with the arrival of the new chief prosecutor and the switch from the last one? How do you feel that this new chief prosecutor might proceed with the investigation? And the third question that I'll answer is it kind of clustered together a number of questions, and it kind of touches on something that each of you all said, which is related to activism. So, Michael, you finished your commentary about how can we make international law bend, and we make it bend by activists, both at the local level, at the national level, at the international level. We heard from Raji and Suhad about what's happening in the OPT and in Israel. Now, one of the other aspects comes around to the disconnect that's going on between the elites, particularly in the West, and civil society. We see a growing number of movements in Western societies, for example, for Palestinian human rights, but their governments not either supporting the call for a Palestinian state, or indeed supporting the investigation into the ICC. And the UK is a very good example of this process, whereby the UK government has said that it's against the ICC investigation. However, we witnessed one of the biggest demonstrations for Palestinian rights that took place in London only a few weeks back. So we see this fundamental disconnect going on between the elites and the leaders. And I just wondered if some of you, any of you would like to comment on that and give us some of your insights into any of these three questions. I'll do what I did before, and I'll go first to Raji, then Suhad, and then Michael. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mandy. Let me again, talk about the ICC and the change of the prosecutor. I think Ocampo was a real disaster as the first prosecutor for the ICC. And Bensouda, she left, and she's the icon of justice. She's one of the icons for justice in the 21st century. And she showed, and her team, real courage and ability to defend the independence, credibility, and professionalism. And she acted according to the book, as we lawyers say. So that was fantastic. Karim Khan, he's a newcomer, and I don't think, ICC, it's one or two person. It's not the prosecutor. Of course, the prosecutor plays an important role, but we can say there is institution. And when I say, the train departed the station, when you form investigative team and it begins working, that means it begins working independently. Even if Karim Khan, with all due respect, and I'm not assuming that or anticipating that, he says, no, you have to slow down, you shouldn't go in this direction, you have to go in this direction. No, there is real independence, for these investigation teams, and they are independent enough, they are professional enough, they know what to do, they don't wait, instruction, from somewhere in the top. The history and the background of Karim Khan make us no worries. For me, I have nothing to worry about. It's vice versa. He's first-class defense lawyer, and he has very strong charisma. And I think, he will contribute, hopefully, in very positive way to what had happened, at the ICC. So I hope he will be helpful in this regard. And we personally have nothing against him, or we have no observation about him. It's vice versa. We anticipate he contribute in a positive way. Now, regarding the United and Peace Resolution at the UN, I think it's obvious and clear the facts of what's going on in this conflict. This is the most well-documented conflict in history. Thanks for civil society, thanks for human rights organizations, thanks for fantastic, wonderful special rapporteurs to the occupied territories, thanks for the UN at large in documenting this. So it's not matter, once again, and as Michael put it, I mean, rightly, there is no lack of information. Everybody, I mean, knows really what's going on at that part of the world. There is real political will? There is real political will for the major powers? I don't feel it. But I would say one thing, that in these 11 days, for the first time, for me, I have heard in the last 30 years, since Oslo Accords, that people say this status quo cannot go on as such. That's something new. And this voice coming basically from Europe, it's intolerable. We cannot continue. This is said by EU countries, this is said by UN senior officials. There is something broken, I mean, in this time. And I don't think Palestinians do have too much tolerance. We cannot continue with that. It's not human to continue with that. And it's mission impossible to continue with that. So I hope something moved in the hearts and minds of the people who has the power. I'm talking about Europe. I'm talking about states with weights who can make real difference. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict, it's not a humanitarian issue. It's not a matter of ration, food, medical aid, lifting the siege, allowing some more hours of electricity, bringing some medicine to this or that part, opening this or that road, allowing more people to pray at Al-Haram al-Sharif or Al-Aqsa. I mean, this is not a problem. This is exactly how Israel derailed the course of discussion. There is real and first-class political problem on two levels. First level, the Palestinians inside the green line in a clear-cut voice say, we need a protection. This is what Palestinian civil society inside the green line said, loudly and clearly, and addressed the UN. They cannot accept this prolonged deep discrimination, this prolonged deep apartheid for them inside state claims it's part of their citizen. Now, the other side of the issue, for how long we can tolerate, we as a Palestinian, this belligerent occupation, and for how long we can be real good victims for criminals. Now, right of self-determination is known. I mean, if ICC, universal jurisdiction, international law blocked, what is the difference between this so quote-unquote civilized world and ISIS? Both, they don't believe in it. And should we be just keeping silent and being good victim. All what we want in this conflict, simple, direct to the point. Dignity, freedom, end of occupation, and respect of international law, international material law, and the human rights, and the dignity of Palestinian in this part of the world. We don't want less or more. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Raji. Suhad, would you like to respond to any of these questions?
Yeah, maybe very shortly. I do want to comment on what Raji said concerning the ICC and the new prosecutor, Karim Khan. I do trust that a very highly professional work will be done by Palestinian NGOs, as well as the staff of Karim Khan himself, the prosecutor, and the staff in the ICC to do the same. Concerning, I'm not fully confident that I heard the last question because there were some internet disruptions, but if I understood, and excuse me if I went to another direction. But I mean, there is certainly a shift in framing of the situation in terms of human rights, how we perceive, how we connect the human rights violations with the system as such, characterizing the system as such. And what, as Professor Link indicated, what was very rare to hear 30 years ago is becoming more mainstream today in terms of framing. And in our international advocacy work, including with politicians and European parliaments, including the EU and the national parliaments, we see a shift. But there is still a gap between what we see on three levels. One, the level of the public, what they see, what they conclude, their convictions of what they see on the ground. The level of the staff, even on the level of the ministries, and their convictions of the injustice that are being done in the context of Palestine, and the decision makers. But what for sure we have been perceiving, that these perceptions of there is justice that needs to be done, there is injustices being practiced on the ground, is growing up, which makes me much more optimistic than others on this level, regardless of what we see and hear officials, I mean top officials, declaring, announcing, and so on. I see, I mean, this is going up. Hopefully it will reach the politicians and the decision makers at some point.
I sincerely hope so, Suhad. Michael, would you like to give your closing comments to these questions?
Yeah, I will, Mandy, and I'm cognizant of the time, and I'm cognizant I have another panel to join in a few minutes. So let me be very succinct. Three questions. First of all of them very smart and insightful. The first one has to do with whether or not the UN General Assembly could form around a Uniting for Peace resolution, which I think is a grand idea. That was obviously meant going back to the Korea conflict in 1950 as a means of circumventing paralysis at the Security Council. Two issues to keep in mind there. In order to create, and it would be on the shoulders of Palestine to expand, to be able to push a Uniting for Peace resolution forward. It means A, the expenditure of a lot of political credit in order to be able to do that. B, you need to ensure that you've got broad support in the General Assembly to be able to do so. But three, and the most important thing is, it's got to be uniting around an issue that's going to make a difference. And that's why it's happened so rarely. Obviously, it was Uniting for Peace resolution from the General Assembly that was able to put the advisory opinion in 2003 to the International Court of Justice, which declared the following year on the legality of the wall. So it's something that the Palestinians, I hope, are thinking of, but they've got to make sure politically they gauge their support, and then I suppose strategically they've got the kind of issue that's going to push the issue forward. Secondly, with respect to the International Criminal Court, I just realized as you asked your question, Mandy, today is the last day for Prosecutor Bensouda in office. Tomorrow, Prosecutor Khan takes office. Obviously, this is a wait and see. Everything I've heard about him, I've never met him. Prosecutor Khan is an accomplished barrister and legal advocate. He knows international human rights, international criminal law with great depth, and he's performed on both sides, if you like, of the aisle with respect to this. So one can only hope that he realizes the importance of the issue with respect to the charges in the situation of Palestine and proceeds appropriately. And with respect to the other thing with respect to the ICC, just keep in mind the Rome Statute doesn't only devolve power to the International Criminal Court in order to be able to do this. Virtually every one of the 133 or so members of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court have domesticated the Rome Statute into their national legislation. So they are also sites of being able to initiate war crimes or crimes against humanity proceedings and eventually trials if a person happens to be on their soil who is alleged to have done this. And this, I think, perhaps has particular meaning with respect to the Israeli settlements and with respect to annexation. If we think of who would be responsible would be decision makers, they may well find themselves on the soil of a country, particularly in Europe, or particularly in a country like Canada, where the Rome Statute is domesticated, and if there is political will, proceedings could initiate against them as well.
Thank you very much for that, Michael. And thank you for all of you for keeping to very good time. It just leaves me to thank the panelists very much, Raji Sarani, Sahad Bishara and Michael Link, for their involvement in this first panel. We'll now end this Zoom session, and we'll reconvene back in 10 minutes for the second panel. Thank you very much to the speakers, and your comments give me hope in ways that I hope we can take forward. Thank you very much. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mandy. All the best. Bye, Michael.
Bye, Raji. Bye, Sahad.
Bye. Bye, Suad.